My name is Tom Pantasis. I'm an instructional designer with distance education here at Westchester. And over the next 27 minutes or so, we're going to look at how to create an accessible Word document. We're also going to make sure that everybody understands what accessibility is and why it's important in the online environment. So I think I just covered those objectives, but they're there for you again, just in case, if you want to see where we're headed today. So as I get ready to move on to my next slide here, I want you to think about how you would define accessibility, because I'm going to ask you that question. So let's do that. How do you define accessibility? You can give me a quick response in the chat. That would be great. Something that's easy to understand. Available when needed. That's good, that you can get it when you need it. I'm waiting patiently because the system tells me when people are typing, and I see that 2 folks are still typing. Excellent, Sebastian, can be heard by the hearing impaired, can be read by those with difficulty hearing. Michael, that's great, making sure you're available to students and that students can interact with your course content. Now, I will say there's one element of accessibility that we're not doing with this webinar right now, and that's providing some sort of captioning as we go. So in that sense, we're not doing it. But how you define accessibility, I just put that on the screen. This is kind of the formal definition. It's making sure that our students can access the things that we need them to access, that they can get to the content that you're presenting, that they can use the tools that you're expecting them to use, no matter who they are or what impediments they might have in their lives. So there's a definition that's a pretty good one that we like, that comes from the Office of U.S. Civil Rights when they had an agreement with a community or a technical college system in South Carolina because the college was not doing a good job of making things accessible. And that is to make sure a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to get the same information, to make sure that they can engage in those same interactions, and that they can enjoy the same services as a person without a disability. So what that means is that students have something that is equally effective, equally integrated, and is equivalent in ease of use as you can do given the circumstances. So this isn't just something that's kind of out there. That's also something that we here at Westchester have made part of our vision and our mission. And I've kind of highlighted there on the screen for you where this idea comes from those things. And I think this is the updated vision statement where I grabbed this. I know we're in the process of changing that. But the new one has a statement similar to this if this is not the new one as well. So it's also the law that we do some of these things. We do receive federal funding here at Westchester, which means we have to make sure that our learning materials are accessible, that our courses are accessible to students with disabilities, and these are the 2 laws that apply in that regard. So one way that we do that and that we encourage folks, faculty members, to do that is to incorporate this idea of universal design and learning. So I have an area on this picture that's circled in red. How would you describe that area to someone who doesn't know what it is? Like, what would you call that? You could just type that real quickly in the chat. Yeah, I can sometimes. Do the best you can. Street to sidewalk ramp, that works. The lower left corner of the picture with the woman in her shadow. Yes, Michael, that one. I circled that area down there, specifically on the ground there. Stop and make sure you're safe. The walkway. I'm specifically looking at that area with the dots, okay, where it's clearly a kind of a ramp from street up onto the curb, up onto the sidewalk. Some people call that a curb cut. And so my next question to all of you is, who is that there for? Why is that put there? Why are those bumps there, and why is that curb cut, that kind of ramp, added in there? People with less mobility. So folks that might be in a wheelchair. Perfect, Sebastian. You were right on cue there. The bumps are there for those who are visually impaired to kind of help them know, hey, there's a road here. That's right. But I also want to ask, who else do those things help beyond those who they're specifically put in for? They help the elderly. That's great. People with strollers. Yep, I can relate to that. Marginalized people. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but that's okay. Michael's still typing. Yeah, people to see the difference between street and sidewalk. That folks that might be on their smartphones and not paying attention. So these things that are added with specific folks with disabilities in mind end up helping a much broader array of people than maybe was originally intended. And that's kind of the idea that we're going for in online courses when we do things like making our documents accessible. Now, I just put the definition for universal design and learning up there on the screen, but it's this idea that we're trying to build and create things to make them as accessible for the broadest possible audience as possible, and that even though we may do some things to help a specific subset, they can end up helping a much broader audience. And there's universal design and learning has kind of three broad categories, which I put up here on the screen. And the key concept of universal design and learning is variety, that we try to do a variety of different things, that we do a variety of engagement techniques, that we present information in a variety of ways. So not just text, that we use visuals and audio and video, and that we give students a variety of ways to demonstrate their learning, that if they're not doing the same thing over and over and over again. When we build courses with variety across those areas, you will make your course that much more accessible for students. So that's kind of a little bit about the background of these accessibility things. And I just want to touch on one kind of big question that tends to come up. And that is, some faculty like to say, I don't want to take these extra steps. I want to wait until I have to do something because I have a student who definitely needs an accommodation. And I can certainly understand where someone's coming through from that point of view. But I like to encourage faculty to try to do some of these steps at the beginning when they are creating resources, rather than waiting until they know they need them. One, because it may end up helping students who don't specifically request the assistance. And two, if you do it at the beginning, you never have to worry about, did I do that or not later on. So some of the things that I'm going to show you here, I hope that you will kind of take them and start incorporating them in the ways that you work and prepare for courses. All right, so the concept here that I want you to remember as you walk away from this webinar is to try to do that one extra thing, that one extra step. And I'm going to show you a couple different things in Word documents, but hopefully you'll pick one and you'll try to start incorporating that one extra thing as you go forward from here. It's this idea of +1. So from here on out, Word documents, here are some things you should keep in mind. Now, I have highlighted a section of Microsoft Word in the red box up here, and this is called the Styles area. If you were like me, you probably ignored this area, or currently ignore this area, because you weren't really sure what it was there for. Until someone explained it to me, I just ignored it. I didn't touch it. But what you can find in that Styles box are these different things called headings. And I think the third one in is heading 1, and the fourth one in is heading 2. Headings are a way to kind of put an invisible outline in the background of your document that makes it really easy for someone who's using a tool called a screen reader, which is software that reads the text of the screen. So headings will allow someone using a screen reader to jump to the different sections of the document very quickly. So most syllabuses that I see tend to be fairly lengthy documents, 10, 12 pages long. If you don't incorporate this heading structure, someone who uses a screen reader has to listen to the whole document to kind of find that part that they want. If you incorporate heading structure, they can jump to the appropriate heading and then find that information much more efficiently. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when we get into Word. But if you can start to incorporate these heading structures when you make your documents, it will be very helpful. And this is a very easy thing to do. You'll see in a few minutes here. All right, another thing to do when you're working on your Word documents is to put hyperlinks inside of descriptive text. So I have good example at the top and the bad example at the bottom. Now, I want you to close your eyes right now, and I can't tell if you're doing it or not, and I want you to just listen as I read the good example and then read the bad example. And I'm going to read it kind of like a screen reader would read it to a student who can't see very well. So close your eyes. Here's the good example. Office of Distance Education, link, best practices for creating an accessible online course, end link. All right, keep your eyes closed. Here's the bad example. Link, click here, end link, for the Office of Distance Education, best practices for creating an accessible online course, or go to link, http://wcupa.edu/distanceed, end link. I hope you saw there the kind of the difference between good and bad and why we want to try to do good rather than bad. It can get very tedious to listen to those really long links. One quick caveat for this is if you have created a document that needs to be printed out for someone and you need them to be able to go to the web address, that can be kind of challenging if you put it inside of descriptive text. So you do have to keep in mind your audience when you're preparing these documents. But in the digital environment, we want to do that first bullet up there at the top. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind when you're doing Word documents is if you're using any sort of image, you have to include either a caption or some sort of alternative text. And again, that goes for folks that are using screen readers. It's so that they can have text read aloud that's describing the image. So I've done a caption here, and hopefully you read that at the bottom of the black box, because I'm going to show you the picture in a minute, and we're going to see how well I did. All right, so tell me how well I did in the chat box. Did you feel like you have a sense of what this image was when you didn't see it there a second ago? Okay, so the trick with this, a good rule of thumb that someone has told me, is how you would describe a picture to someone over the phone. Okay, I'm not going to say anything more than just look at what's on the screen for this one, because I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, I'm moving on. In the online environment, you do want to be careful about color combinations and contrasts. This website that we have listed here is a good one to go to when you want to kind of compare two colors together. You'll see in the middle where it says the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. That's two different colors, and to the right of that, it's giving me a green check mark saying that that's a good combination. It's also giving me a specific number about the contrast between the two. Another thing to keep in mind with color is that if you're using only color in a Word document to denote a change, some people may not pick up on that, especially if they're colorblind. So it's always a good idea to use more than one domain, to use both color and maybe a bold or color and italics to emphasize something that you're trying to emphasize in a written document. This is more about writing when you're writing those Word documents, to be attentive to the language that we're using. I can't tell you how many syllabi I have seen that say office hours are MT and R from 6 to 8 p.m. Maybe not those time frames, but you get the point. It's not that much harder for us to type out Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. It helps when it's being read aloud. It's just a little clearer. It's kind of better practice to do that. And so for anyone that's in the online faculty development program, when you do your syllabus assignment, it will be a good idea to make sure you spell out those acronyms. Making sure you have good organizational structure, and this is where the headings that I mentioned at the very beginning come into play. Headings are like outlines, so your big topics are heading 1s, which I've tried to denote on the slide here, and then subtopics become a heading 2s, and then heading 3s, etc., so on and so forth. So keep in mind how you're organizing information. All right, so this is my slide to say it's time to go play in the sandbox. So I'm going to make a quick switch here. So if you give me just a second, if there's any questions as I'm making this transition, now's a great time to ask them. And of course, I picked the small one. So let me make that bigger for everybody. All right, so I've just switched over to my desktop, and you should see a Word document. And I have highlighted some of the different things that I want to show you here in Word. Now, I'm working on a PC, so keep that in mind if you have a Mac. Some of this may look a little bit different, but not drastically so. So one of the first things that I do when I'm checking the accessibility of a Word document is I'm going to go to the View option in the menu, which is up at the top, and I'm going to select the navigation pane, which is going to show me headings once we start putting them in. So I like to turn that on, and I'll make it a little bigger so you guys can see it. Now, Microsoft Word on PCs comes within a built-in accessibility checker that will check some elements of your document. And you can find that under File, which is in the upper left. And you want this box here that says Check for Issues. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then the middle option there that says Check for Accessibility. So I'm going to run that. I'm going to click that. And I get a box on the right side here that is showing me what my issues are. And we're going to work through some of that. And what I like about this accessibility checker is that if I click on something, it's going to take me right to that element. And so we might as well go ahead and do this one first, since it's right at the top of the page. That's a picture. And this picture does not have any sort of alternative text. So a screen reader doesn't know how to read it out loud. It's very easy to fix that. A simple right click, and then you select the Format Picture option. You get these lovely menus. I'm going to go to the third one, Layout and Properties, and I had already opened it up earlier, but that alt text right there, I open that up and I can put in some brief description. And I think that would be sufficient. And I just close it and I'm good. I've now added it. And I can close this menu pane here. I've added some alternative text that lives in the background behind the picture. If the picture failed to load for some reason, that text would display instead. Now that missing alternative text item for picture 2 just went away because I took care of that. So the accessibility checker will, as you correct issues, things will go away. I have some other pictures further down. We're not going to worry about that. So let's talk a little bit now about those styles that I have been mentioning and that the headers. So this is a example syllabus that is floating out there. And if you just look at it right now using your eyes, you can very clearly see where there's different sections. But someone who can't see it, there are no headings added in yet. So the first thing I want to do is add in a heading. Right here where it says course description, I'm going to highlight that. And I'm going to come up to this styles box. And because this is a major topic of my syllabus, I'm going to select heading 1. And so what that does is that has labeled that heading as a heading 1. Now, Word comes with preset defaults. So it changed the size, font, and color. But once I have made that selection up here in the styles bar, I can change these items back to what I want them to be. I can make it look almost like it did before, and it will still retain that heading code in the background. If I click on this and I look up here, you can see that heading 1 has been selected, whereas if I click on this other one, it just says normal. So again, let me show you that. If this was a heading 1, I would highlight it, I would come up to the styles bar and I'd click heading 1, and it turns it into a heading. It's that simple to add your heading structure. Now, I don't know if you noticed this while you were watching, but on the left side, under that navigation pane, you'll see that I now have 2 headings listed. And what I really like about heading structure is in really long documents, it makes it really easy to move sections, because all I have to do in the navigation pane is drag and drop the title of that section and let go, and it's going to automatically make the switch for me. The problem was I had lots of text underneath that one, so let me move it back. And now I should be back where the course description is up front. So let me add another heading in here, and let's pretend that this accessing university resources is a subtopic of the learning goals. I know it's not, but let's pretend. In that case, I would maybe make that a heading too. And so that's a subheading of learning goals now. And it's not showing up on there, and that's okay. But sometimes it will show as a subheading. Now, if I wanted to change the defaults on these various headings, I could right-click and modify it or update heading 1 to match something that I had already selected on the document. And another thing is you might see that I only have 4 headings on this styles box. Additional headings appear as you make selections for the one prior. So if I had highlight something and make it heading 4, then I'll get an option for a heading 5. And there are 6 heading levels. Usually most documents that I see don't get past 3, sometimes 4, but very rarely. Usually you're just using 1s and 2s. So that's the very basics of heading structure. For those of you that are in OFD, we will expect you to put that into your syllabus document. And again, I hope you can see it's a super simple thing to do, and once it's done, you don't have to worry about it ever again. You've added it in and you're good to go. All right, so the hyperlinks. Let me come down here to this section. I'll make it right in here. You can see I have these 2 hyperlinks that are not in the format that I suggested. So resources of WCU's libraries are readily accessible at a distance in or at the library distance ed subject guide. So I put the text in that I want. I'm going to cut this hyperlink. I'm going to highlight the text that I want to turn into a hyperlink. I'm going to right-click on that. I shouldn't have said right. Oh, yeah, there it is. Right link. I'll select the link option, and down here where it says address, I will paste that link in and click OK. And I've just turned that into the hyperlink that we're using descriptive text. So just to show you that again, library services, policies on services, support for distance available. Or I might change the sentence to say, here are the support for distance education students. So I'm going to use quick keys this time. A quick key for cutting is you hold down Control and tap X. I'm going to highlight the text I want to turn into a hyperlink. My mouse is misbehaving. So if I want to quickly use the quick key, it's Control K, and it brings up that box. And then I can paste and click OK. Another way to do it is to highlight the text and come up to the top and go to Insert. And there's a link option right there for you to get to that same menu. So 3 different ways for you to do that for hyperlinks. We already did alt, so let's do charts. So I have 2 different types of charts here, and I want to point out 2 different aspects of that. One, this first chart is actually a picture, which is a problem because the information in it is not accessible to a screen reader. So you either need to redo the chart so that it's in chart form like this is down here, or put in some alternative text that's describing what's going on in the chart or the important information that's in the chart. So just keep that in mind when you're using pictures of charts or tables or graphs, that information may not always be accessible to everyone. And then tables, when you're using tables like this grade chart, which is very common in syllabi, tables are read in the order that the tab button goes. So I've clicked in this first box and I go, so it's going to say 93 plus, A, 77 to 79, C plus. That reading order doesn't make a lot of sense. So keep that in mind when you're creating tables, that you want things to read from left to right, row by row. So I'm sure some faculty members do this to try and save space, which is admirable when you're printing things, but in the digital environment, it doesn't really matter that much. Do it in the order, the tab order, when I press the tab key and it goes from box to box, left to right, row by row. So keep that in mind. All right, I think one last thing, if I were to go save this document, File, Save As, and I switch to a PDF, if I've used heading structure and alt tags and I've done my hyperlinks the way we talked about, then your PDF will be an accessible document as well. So if you set it up right while you're working in Word, then you'll also have an accessible PDF document. One other item that appears frequently on the accessibility checker that I want to briefly mention is repeat blank characters. This matters for a screen reader because the program's not smart enough to know that you're just using the spaces as formatting, so it will read the spaces aloud to the student. It'll say space, 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 however many times. So it's always better to get rid of those spaces and just use enters, or tabs are a little bit better. So that's something else to kind of keep in mind. All right, I'm going to switch back to the presentation and wrap things up here. If there's any questions, let me know. Mary Beth is typing. Sebastian is typing. Mary Beth, the styles should be able to be done in Google OpenOffice. I'm not 100%. The Google Drive, I know, has a lot of this stuff built into it that you can do. I don't know if there's an accessibility checker, but styles is and the heading structure is very common throughout the internet. You can even do it in D2L if you're creating a page. Yes, Sebastian, I can do that about the saving. I'll bring that back up. When you go to File, Save As, this is where you would name your document, and then underneath here is the type of file that you would be saving. If you save it as a PDF and you've already done those things that I've been talking about, like adding in headings and making your hyperlinks correct and just all those things that make the document accessible, when you save it as a PDF, the PDF will also be an accessible document. So it'll be able to be read by a screen reader really well, and the heading structure will be in there. Does that help? Great. All right. So let me stop sharing, make this one go away. We're back to my presentation. So the key thing here with this presentation that we're hoping to convey to all of you is awareness, to just make sure that you're starting to do these things, that you're looking for these things, starting to do these things, that you're looking for these things, and you're taking into account when you're working. So if you have questions, reach out to your assigned instructional designer or contact our office. We're happy to help talk through any of this a little more thoroughly. I think I've gotten all your questions. It looks like it. Everyone's saying thank you, which is great. My contact info and our social media stuff is up there. I'm done at this point, and I will stick around for a few minutes to answer your questions. I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight or this afternoon. I know your time's valuable, and I'm grateful that you spent some of it with me. So thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon.